It's a great advantage to know how to make buttercream flowers in addition to all the other types of sugar flowers. This means that you can always crank up buttercream flowers for your buttercream cakes instead of looking at other types of decorations to put on the cake. We are not saying that other mediums of decoration would not work for a buttercream cake. However, it would be simpler to just use one medium of decoration from start to finish in your cake decorating project. How to make buttercream flowers, for starters. There are some basic things you need to have as you embark on learning how to make buttercream flowers. Some of these basic things include the following: piping bags, flower nails, piping tips, couplers, templates, flower scissors, parchment paper, drying trays, good quality buttercream, food coloring, basic designs. By experience, we know that one of the most popular flowers known to man is the rose flower. In the same vein, we think that if you start out by learning how to make a buttercream rose, you will have a flower that can fit on any cake. The great thing about buttercream rose is that you can tweak it in many ways. You can make a rosebud, or a 5, 7 or multi-petal rose, or even a giant rose. Although it isn't the easiest buttercream flower to make, it is always the most multi-purpose flower to have at the ready. There are a few other simple flowers that can work as fillers flowers or for decorating cupcakes. How to make buttercream flowers, buttercream roses. Instructions. Stage 1. 1. Cut your parchment paper into small squares, measure with the diameter of the flower nail. 2. Assemble your piping bag and fill with buttercream and fit with the dot piping tip. 3. Place a square of parchment paper on the flower nail. 4. Hold your piping bag in one hand and the flower nail in the other hand. If you are right-handed, then the flower nail would be in your left hand while the piping bag would be in your right hand. Stage 2. 1. Then hold the piping bag straight up and start squeezing out the icing to form a cone. When you have a cone about 1½ inch high, lift off the piping tip and stop squeezing. 2. Next, change the piping tip to the flower tip Wilton 104. Hold the piping bag at a 45 degrees angle to the top of the flower nail with the wide end of the tip touching the tip of the cone you have piped or a little below the middle. The narrow end of the piping tip should point upwards and a little bit inward. 3. At this point, you'll have to do 3 things at once. You squeeze out the icing, turn the piping tip, and rotate the flower nail. When you squeeze the piping bag, you at the same time, move the piping tip up from the bottom to form a strip of icing. Gradually turn the flower nail anti-clockwise, for right-handed persons, so that the icing you are squeezing out would overlap at the top of the cone and then come back to the point where you started. 4. Next, move your piping tip up and down in a straight motion. No need to loop this strip of icing at the bottom of the cone. This step would complete the rosebud. Stage 3. 1. Now pipe the top 3 petals. Let the wide end of your piping tip touch the middle of the base of the rosebud, with the narrow end facing straight up. The motion of turning the nail and moving the piping tip up and down would form a half-moon petal that's upright. Ensure that the wide end of your piping tip touches the base of the rosebud, or else the petal would not attach to the rosebud. 2. Repeat this process, starting a little behind where the first petal ended for the second petal. Do this again for the third petal, but this time you end by overlying this petal at the beginning of the first petal. 3. After this point, all you have to do is to start out the next petal from slightly behind where the last petal stopped, following the first step of this stage. Notes and expert tips. Notes on buttercream. 1. Always use the right consistency of buttercream. This is a stiff consistency, and you know it's the right consistency if you can pipe out a cone and it would stand. 2. Ensure that you sift your icing sugar well, because lumps in your icing can be a real pain when you start piping. 3. Do not overwhip the buttercream, or else it would have air bubbles, which are a real nightmare when you start piping. 4. Make an extra stiff consistency of buttercream for your rose flower cone's base. 5. Add color a little at a time until you get the right shade you want. Remember that the colors are likely to darken with time. Tips for more realistic looking buttercream flowers. 1. Make flowers of different sizes so that they'll really mimic nature. 2. Use at least 2 shades of green for your foliage. If you are making vines and stems for large bouquets, use a lighter shade of green. Then use a darker shade of green for leaves and grass. 3. Use two-tone buttercream. There are 3 methods of doing this. The first method is to fill one side of your piping bag with one shade of the color and the other side with another shade of the same color. The second and easier method is to fill 2 piping bags each with different shades of the color you want. Then place the 2 piping bags in a bigger piping bag and then use a large coupler to hold them together. The third method is to place a plastic wrap on your working surface and pipe 1 row each of the 2 shades of color that you want to use. Then roll the plastic wrap into a sausage shape. Insert this sausage into a bigger piping bag. How to transfer buttercream flowers to a cake. To make your transfer of buttercream flowers easier, it's best to pipe them on a square of parchment paper. That way, you can lift the parchment paper off the flower nail and place it on a tray to freeze or store. If possible, do not attempt to place your buttercream flowers on the cake immediately you pipe them out. If you can make them a little bit ahead of time and freeze, you will find that transferring the flowers to the cake would be less accident-prone. In a situation where you have to transfer your buttercream flower to the cake immediately you pipe them, it's best to use a flower lifter or scissors. Pipe some mounds of buttercream on the surface of the cake before placing the buttercream flowers on it. These would act both as glue to attach the flowers to the cake and also give the flowers a lift from off the surface of the cake. Use Russian piping tips. Russian piping tips are great tools for cranking out beautiful life-like buttercream flowers whether on cupcakes or large cakes. They are also great for making multi-tone buttercream flowers and decorations. True, Russian piping tips are easier and faster to use than the old method of making buttercream flowers 1 petal at a time. However, we must warn that there is a learning curve to it. You also have to practice knowing how to make buttercream flowers with Russian piping tips. In addition to practicing, you also have to buy some additional piping tips, bags, and couplers. Conclusion. When you set out to learn how to make buttercream flowers, you have to be patient. Constant practice is needed in addition to patience. You don't expect that your first attempt would be perfect. So, cut yourself some slack and have fun along the way. Remember that a good buttercream recipe is the bedrock of successful buttercream flowers. We hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to our channel and turn the notification on, so that you will know once we post a new video. Do not forget to visit our site, www.cakedecorationproducts.com for more cake content like this.